All right. Does everybody have a lesson 6 handout? If you do not, please raise your hand. We've got some men who are, and we got a couple right here. Some men who are handing out the lesson 6 handouts. Some over here as well, Mike. Also, I have lessons 1 through 5. If you have been missing any, I've got them up here. You can see me after class. We'll get you taken care of. Lesson 6 handout. Just raise your hand if you don't have one. One of the men will get to you. Back here in the back. Okay, so this is our final lesson together with Esther, seeing the unseen God. I know that many of you were absent last week because of the women's retreat and other things, so we'll give a quick recap of what happened at the end of the book. We went ahead and finished the text last week. So where we had left off was Haman had been killed for his discrepancies, right? He had been hanged on the same gallows that he had built for Mordecai, and so Haman is dead. However, that decree that he put out is still in effect. And at the end of the year, in what month, class? What month is this going to take place? Adar. Very good. The month of Adar, 12th month, 13th day, the Jews are going to be attacked by people in the kingdom. And whether this was a formal army or probably more likely just a group of people who are prejudiced against the Jews, mercenaries, all these other Persian people are going to go out in the king's name and try to kill as many Jews as they can on that day, completely annihilate them for the problems that Haman had with Mordecai. So Mordecai is given the signet ring of the king in chapter 8, and Esther is actually given the house of Haman, who she puts Mordecai over. Then Esther goes before the king and pleads for her people. She says, is there any way, king, that you can revoke the law that you put in place? And of course he can't, but he does allow Mordecai and Esther to put a counter decree in, which says on that day, the 13th day, the month of Adar, you can try to defend yourself and actually kill, annihilate, and plunder those people who are trying to hurt you. And the Jews just rejoice over this because this gives them the permission from the king to stop what's happening and actually defend themselves and kill the others. And many people are converted to the Jews because of that. Then we come to the day, the 13th day, the month of Adar, and the Jews have all the momentum. They have God on their side, and they go out and just annihilate those who were going against them. And in that day, and then in an additional day asked for by Esther in Shushan, they kill a combined 75,000 some people, including the 10 sons of Haman, just to kind of cover themselves and to get back for what was happening to them. And then at the end of the book, the last 3 verses of chapter 10, Mordecai is elevated to the second in command. Of course, he's the same position now that Haman was. However, he seeks goodness and peace in contrast with Haman, who was all about himself. So that's the book. And what I want to know from you is, what did you learn about these particular characters? I'll start with King Ahasuerus. What stood out to you in this book about King Ahasuerus? Character traits. Things that are admirable or things that are not admirable. Say it again.
I found that even though he was a king, he was a leader, he was a follower. He listened to other people instead of initiating his own thought, his own authority as his king.
That's wonderful. So saying that even though he was a leader, he really just listened to what other people are saying. And that's true. I can't find anything throughout the book where he actually made a decision on his own. He was always asking other people, which is not necessarily a bad thing, except for he never made a decision on his own. And in such, he was a deficient leader in my mind. He was more interested in pleasing others than doing what was right. And then he was easily angered. Remember in chapter 1, his wrath burned within him, easily angered. And as we just mentioned over here, he was also easily influenced. That can be a good thing. At the end of the book, he was influenced for good, but certainly having that easily a sway, particularly when evil comes before you, can be a detriment and can give you a deficiency in leadership. So it opened the door for evil to essentially rule. Anybody else about King Ahasuerus? Yes.
What I loved about Esther and Mordecai, their faith, how effective their faith was, brought boldness
So it's really the providence of God for what they did rather than actually King Ahasuerus' work, which is exactly right. One thing I did learn just from reading, remember Herodotus, the historian. He was a Greek historian who happened to live in Persia at the time. But he wrote about King Ahasuerus when he was going out to fight against Greece. He had some of his soldiers and architects to start building a bridge over a waterway in order to help with the fighting. And then in the middle of that bridge completion, a huge storm came in and the wind and the waves just tore that bridge apart. Well, King Ahasuerus, in his wisdom, tells his soldiers to go out into the water with chains and beat the water as punishment for that storm. So I find that gives you a little bit more insight to his leadership style. All right. How about Haman? What'd you learn about Haman? Very vengeful. Absolutely. Prideful. Deceptive. Absolutely. All those good attributes to describe Haman. So I put he was a self-absorbed Agagite. Agagite because Agag was the king of the Amalekites, the ancestry of Haman. Very self-absorbed. He did not grasp the difference between resume virtues and eulogy virtues, or he didn't care. So resume virtues, when you're applying for a high-tech job, you're going to put down your education, you're going to put down your experience, maybe how much money you earned for a company, or how much money you saved a company, how you grew that company. But when you have your funeral, your eulogy virtues are going to be very different, right? If that's mentioned at all, it's going to be a very low part of that eulogy. The eulogy is going to be about how you treated others, particularly for good, how you influenced others to be better, and how you treated other people. And he thought no one greater than himself. Remember when the king asked Haman, what should be done for the man to whom the king delights to honor? And the Bible says Haman thought to himself, who else would it be besides me? I'm the best one. Ben Franklin says, he who loves himself will have no rivals. I think that fits Haman very well. He was so puffed up that he loved himself more than anybody else could love him. True leadership is not about being in charge, as Haman would find out. It's about taking care of those in your charge. That's the point of being a leader there. And then Dan Winkler says, Haman was a hate man who became a hangman. I think that fits rather well. Okay, so Mordecai. What do you think about Mordecai? Courageous, very good. Courageous and wise. Servant of God. All right, all those are extremely good. He engineered many events in Esther. Remember, he was the one that started raising Esther. He stood around by the women's quarters when Esther had that preparation period. He was outside the king's gate. He was the one that got the message to Esther about what was going on with the edict. He did what needed to be done to preserve his people, or in this case, God's people as well. He took in Esther, and he never changed who he was. When we're first introduced to him, he's a man who takes in his cousin, raises her, tells her about that she needs to step up for God. And then at the end of the book, when he's in power, just like Haman was, he still seeks goodness and peace for other people. So he never changed who he was. He knew his bounds. We don't find in the book that he ever tried to change Esther's name. And then in chapter 4, we find that when he had sackcloth and ashes, he knew he could not go beyond the king's gate. He didn't try to rush in there and get to Esther and say, this needs to be changed immediately. He knew his bounds. And sometimes we just need to understand there are limitations to what we can do on earth, even if it's something we really want. There's a poem, the Serenity Prayer, that says, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. I think that fits with what Mordecai was all about. He supported his leaders. Remember, I said at the end of chapter 2, when he overhears this plot to kill the king, he had Esther inside the kingdom. He could have thought in his mind, let's try to get together with these two rogue eunuchs and overthrow the king, and then I can be in power right away. He bided his time, right? He accepted the king. He respected the office of the king and did not try to overthrow him. That reminds me of David and King Saul. David knew that God wanted him to be king. He had the opportunity on more than one occasion to kill King Saul and expedite the process. But instead, he respected the office of the king, said, I'm not going to lay my hand on God's anointed. God knows what he's doing. And Mordecai understood that. He also knew how to accept uncertainty. In chapter 4, he tells Esther, who knows but you have come to such a time as this. Now, he also knew that God's plan was going to be in effect, whether it's going to be Esther or not. He was willing to accept that uncertainty. God does things sometimes that we don't understand, but we need to just wait on him. 2 Corinthians 5:7, we walk by what? Faith and not by sight. Okay, how about Esther? What did we learn about Esther through this book? Respectful, certainly, of many people. Faithful, good, loyal. So she was a devoted servant, which goes along with these words we just mentioned. A devoted servant. She accepted coaching, not only of Mordecai. It was good that she listened to Mordecai and not divulging her ethnicity at that time. But she also listened to Haggai, the king's eunuch. And she listened to him about what to put on to adorn herself in order to find the king's favor. Let's look at Proverbs chapter 12, verse 15. Proverbs 12:15 in relation to this thought about Esther. Proverbs 12:15. If somebody has that, if they can read that for us. Very good. So Esther didn't just do what was right in her own eyes as Haman did. He who heeds counsel is wise. So Esther was a wise person. She knew the value of fasting, going without in order to focus on God. She risked her life for her people. She said, I'm going to go before the king at the end of chapter 4, and if I perish, I perish. She understood the urgency of the times. She humbly respected her king, very similar to Mordecai. Several occasions, including chapter 5 and verse 8, she goes before the king and doesn't try to slam her wishes over him. She says, if it pleases the king, and if I have found favor in his sight, then please let this be done. She helped rescue her people, certainly, through her actions, and she influenced others. We mentioned in the first lesson that she actually may have been the one right next to King Artaxerxes when Nehemiah came asking to go back to Jerusalem to help rebuild the walls. But even if that wasn't her, even if it was another queen at that time, I personally believe that the influence that she would have had in her position over that 30 years between Esther and Nehemiah would have certainly gained respect and a reputation for the Jewish people among the people around them. So that's my personal thought about how Esther's influence helped. And remember, Nehemiah was a Jew and was actually the cupbearer for the Persian king. So that certainly helped as well. How about God? What do we know about God in this particular book? He orchestrated it all. Absolutely. Absolutely. Not personally mentioned. He's unnamed, but I have on here, he's ever present. Ed alluded to it just a minute ago. But who actually held the power in Esther? If you're reading it from a secular perspective, you think, well, in Esther 1, it's King Ahasuerus. In Esther 3, it really moves over to Haman, who holds the signet ring. And then for a while, it looks like Esther holds the cards. And then at the end, in chapter 10, it's Mordecai who has the signet ring. But really, through the book, who really holds the power? It's God. Very good. And does the power ever shift? Not really. It may go back and forth between people, but God is really the one in control. Who kept the king up at night? Who had the book brought to him? Who had that page with Mordecai's name read before the king? God held the power. And Zeresh, Haman's wife, knew the power of God's people. And she told Haman, along with her friends, if Mordecai is a Jew whom we've begun to fall, you're not going to be able to stand against him. You will continue to fall. How else could an irreversible law by a powerful king be counteracted by a foreign orphan girl? That's the story of Esther. And many of us, as we've already alluded to, have been blessed by God's providence. Does God's name have to be mentioned to give him credit, class? Absolutely not. Every good and perfect gift is from above. So, what do we do when it appears that God is silent in our lives or in our world? What do? We draw near to his people. This is what it's all about, drawing near to his people and getting other people, other converts to join with us. Esther 8, verse 6, she says, how can I bear, to the king, to see the hurt within my people? This is a complete change, remember, because for a while there, she was secluded from her people. She was behind the palace walls and didn't know what was going on. Didn't even know the most significant thing in the Jewish life. But now she says, how can I bear to see the hurt that's going on with my people? Community with God's chosen is essential to our survival. Hebrews 10:25, not forsaking the assembly, making sure we get together. Very important. 1 Corinthians 12 and in Romans 12, Paul talks about us being a body. And a foot can't say to a hand, we don't need you, or ear can't say to an eye, we don't need you. Everybody's important. Everybody has their own role. And we need to draw near to each other so we can fill the body of Christ appropriately. This book is filled with religion, and it shows that God's people are worth saving and God's people are worth loving. God's people are worth saving and worth loving. It shows that he can do anything with anybody at any time in any way, and he still does that today if we let him. This book proves God is in control and cares deeply about his creation. All right, so we learned several attributes. Yeah. That's right. So we can be harmed by even people who profess God's name. But we also need to love them. Very good. So I'm just going to rehash the attributes that we've talked about over these last few weeks. How God is seen, even though his name is not mentioned. God is seen when we refuse evil. When we surround ourselves with peacemakers. When we respect our elders and our parents. When we heed wise advice. When we worship him only. When we control our anger. When we are connected to his people. When we fast privately, don't do it so others can see it. When we offer our lives for him, both in life and, if needed, sacrificing our life for God. When we understand that he is in control. When we learn to be content. When we place others above ourselves. When we understand that God's people will prevail. Through a righteous legacy. When we care for his people. Through conversions to him. When we seek goodness and peace, as Mordecai did at the end of the book. And then through foreshadowing of his counter decree. Just like sin had us before Jesus came as a counter decree, and through his death we're able to have our sins washed away. All right, so the name of God is not written in the book, but his hand is on every single page. So some summaries. Let God work. Isaiah 40 verse 31, he who waits upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up like what? With wings like eagles. Very good. Let God work. Remember when Jesus was before Herod and Pilate, he could have tried to go against what God had, knowing what was coming for him. But he allowed the crucifixion to happen when it was God's plan to happen. When we feel the urge to be militant, we need to remember the words of Christ in Matthew chapter 5. Blessed are the pure in heart. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are the peacemakers. Allow God to have the vengeance. God will raise up for his people leaders like Joseph, like Moses, Daniel, Mordecai, and Esther. He'll do it. We just need to have faith in God. All right, I do have some other things after the study guide, but let's go ahead and do the study guide in lesson 6. King Ahasuerus was a deficient leader who was easily blank and blank. Angered and influenced. Very good. Haman was a blank Agagite. Very good. Self-absorbed. Mordecai blanked the office of the king. Respected. God was the one who held a blank accepted coaching and helped rescue her people. Esther. Very good. God was the one who held the blank in the book of Esther. The power. Very good. When God seems silent, we need to what to his people? Draw near. And God's people are worth blank and worth blank. Worth saving and worth loving. Very good. So I have some questions here. This is going to be very similar to a game that many of you are familiar with. It's going to be Jeopardy style. But I thought we would do this to try to just reinforce some of the things that we learned in this class. I hope you can all see it. If not, I'll try to let you know what's still up there at certain times. So the 5 categories I have are people, places, nationalities, items, who said it, and potpourri, which is kind of a catch-all for what didn't fit in the other 4 categories. So this side of the auditorium is going to be team 1. This side of the auditorium is going to be team 2. Yeah. Yeah. I do need a scorekeeper. Can somebody be a scorekeeper? You can play too. Okay, very good. Sonny's going to be our scorekeeper. And I need a spokesman for each team. I'll just take somebody right here since I can probably hear him. Just somebody to say the final answer if needed. Okay, Angie, me a scorekeeper or the spokesperson over here? Anybody over here? All right, Keith, if needed, you'll be it. All right, Sonny, if you don't mind, because there's 25 questions, there's an odd number. Team 2 starts with 300 points. And I've done the math. It's because the possible maximum number for this team is going to be 300 points more than this team, just because of the odd number. So 300 for Team 2. Team 1, choose where you'd like to go.
People for 300.
People 300, okay. He was the king of Persia during the time of Esther. These are not going to be hard. The king of Persia during the time of Esther. Say it again. Xerxes or Ahasuerus. Very good. All right. So 300 for Team 1. All right, Team 2. Items for what?
For 300.
300. The maximum offer by the king to Esther at her feasts. The king offered something to Esther 3 different times during the book. Up to half her kingdom. Very good. 300 for Team 2. All right, next.
What's the
500. It goes from 100 to 500.
people for 500?
People 500.
We're going to win.
All right. She was the wife of Haman. She was the wife of Haman. Zeresh. Very good. That's 500 for Team 1. All right. I should have said this earlier, but this should be closed note, closed Bible. I think everybody's doing that. Team 2. Potpourri for 300. The length of time of preparation before each woman was to be presented to the king. This is in chapter 2. 1 year. Very good. 300 for Team 2. All right, Team 1.
Potpourri for 500.
Potpourri 500. Maybe I shouldn't have given 300 over here. Okay. The name of the Jewish month on which the lot fell and which Purim is celebrated. The name of the month. You can say it, yeah, say it to Angie so she can answer for you. Adar is correct. 500 for Team 1. All right, Team 2. You're going to need a counter decree here. Places nationality for 500. Okay. King Ahasuerus ruled over this many provinces. This many provinces. It's mentioned several times, including Esther 8:9, the longest verse in the Bible. 100 and what? 127? You agree? Okay. 127 is correct. Team 2. All right.
500 points.
500 for... I've got items and who said it?
She was confirming how many points they got
Yeah.
on that question.
Yes, that question was 500, yes. Thank you. Team 1.
I can't see it, so I can't say.
Items 500. This was unique about the golden vessels at the king's feast in chapter 1. Basically, what was special about the golden vessels? What did they say? They were all different. Very good. They didn't come from a mold. Every vessel was different from the other. Chapter 1. Very good. That was 500. Next. Who said it for 500? So these are quotes. If Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of Jewish descent, you will not prevail against him.
Correct.
You agree? Zeresh is correct. 500, team 2. All right, team 1?
400, your choice.
404
Your choice.
of my choice. I'm going to go with people. It's closest. This queen refused the king's command to show her beauty in Esther chapter 1. Vashti is correct. It was 400. Over here.
400.
Who said it for 400? Will he also assault the queen while I am in the house? King Ahasuerus is correct. He was talking about Haman there. Okay, that was for 400. Team 1.
400 items.
400 items. This item was given to Esther by the king after Haman's death in Esther 8, verse 1. Haman's house is correct. So Haman's house was given to Esther. The signet ring was given to Mordecai. Excellent. Okay. Over here. That was 400, by the way.
Potpourri, 400.
Potpourri, 400. The height of the gallows built by Haman to kill Mordecai. The height of the gallows. 75, I heard 75 what? 75 feet? 75 cubits? That's why I need a spokesperson. Keith, you give me an answer for how high the gallows were based on what you're hearing. 75 feet, I'll accept that. Yeah, it's 50 cubits or 75 feet, that works. The Bible says 50 cubits, but that's what it comes out to. Very good, 400. Okay, over here.
Is there another 400?
There is. Places and nationalities. All right, 400 for places and nationalities. Mordecai was a descendant of this tribe of Israel. Chapter 2. Descendant of this tribe of Israel. What do we say? Benjamin's correct. Very good. Remember, King Saul also came from that line. So, Benjamin, that was 400. Okay, over here I've got two more 300s. Who said it in places, nationalities?
Who said it?
Who said it for 300? Yet all this avails me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate.
Haman.
Haman's correct. Very good. Okay, that was 300. Over here? There's one more 300 if you want.
300.
300 for places, nationalities. Haman was a descendant of this king of Amalek. Descendant of this king. Agag is correct. Okay, so we're down to 100s and 200s. That was for 300 points. All right, 100s, 200s. What's your favorite category, team?
Potpourri.
Potpourri. You love potpourri. Good man. For 100 or 200? 200. Okay. Oh, I wasn't going to say something the first time, but the second time I had to say something. The length of time Esther requested the Jews to fast prior to her plea before the king. Length of time of fasting. How long did she say fast?
3 days. 3 days.
What do you say? Tell Keith it's not always easy to hear when you're up here.
All believe it's 3, raise your hand.
Okay, 3 what? 3 days is correct. All right, that was 200. Over here. I've got people, places, nationalities, items, who said it. That all have 200 left. And then items 200. This is the derivation of the word pure. This is where the word pure comes from. Pure or purum, yeah, the derivation of that word. Casting lots is correct. Very good. That was 200. Okay, over here. People 200. He led Mordecai on horseback through the citadel streets. Haman. Very good. All right, that was 200 points. Over here, we've got two more 200s. 200 for people or places, nationalities. This was the citadel of the Persian Empire and the main setting of the book. Shushan, very good. Susa is the Persian name for it. Okay, that was 200 points for team 1. Over here, I got one more 200 if you want it. Yep. Who said it for 200? And so I will go to the king, which is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. Esther, very good. We're down to the 100s. Team 1. Potpourri for 100. I'm sorry, she got it. This annual feast was created because of the events of Esther. This annual feast was created. Purim, excellent. Okay? Over here, team 2.
Who said it?
Who said it for 100? Who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Mordecai. Excellent. One of my favorite verses in the book. That was for 100 points. Over here, team 1. People for 100. He cared for Esther when she was orphaned. Mordecai. Excellent. 100 points. Okay, back over here. Places, nationalities. Esther did not reveal that she was of this nationality until late in the book. Jewish. Excellent. Okay, and then the final question goes over here because we've given a handicap to team 2. All right, items for 100. This item was given by the king first to Haman, then to Mordecai to demonstrate authority. Signet ring is correct. Okay, so that was 100 points. Do we have a total? I'll give just a minute. That is correct. That is correct. I don't think anybody had to steal from the other team. That would have been frowned upon. Somebody's playing the Jeopardy song. Okay, team 1 had how many? 4,400? 3,700? Okay, so the winners by points is team 1, but everybody wins because everybody got the answers correct. We learned a lot about the book. Okay, so I want to close here. Probably a few minutes left over here. I want to close with just talking about embroidery from a child's perspective. I think this really hits home for what we really need to take home from Esther. Imagine yourself being a 4-year-old or 5-year-old child sitting, looking up at your grandmother as she's doing embroidery, okay? And you're seeing this from the underside. You're seeing lots of red yarn, blues, blacks, oranges, yellows. Don't really see what making of it. And you probably think to yourself, she doesn't know what she's doing, right? She's not making anything that's of any style, anything that I can make out. However, she tells you, just wait. Just wait, you'll see. And then she cuts around it, trims it, puts the wooden frame around it, and then she sits you on her knee and lets you look at it from her perspective. And you see a beautiful sunset overlooking a peaceful valley. And I think that really is what we need to take home from this book, is wait on God, His time frame. When we're looking up, we don't know what He's doing, but He sees it from a different perspective. And we may not know the reasons for what He does until we're with Him in heaven by His side. There's a poem that says, I believe in the sun even when it is not shining, and I believe in love even when there's no one there. And I believe in God even when He is silent. I believe through any trial there's always a way, but sometimes in this suffering and hopeless despair, My heart cries for shelter to know someone's there. But a voice rises within me saying, hold on, my child. I'll give you strength. I'll give you hope. Just stay a little while. When we trust our lives to the hand of an unseen but ever-present and all-knowing God, our lives can be used for His glory, just like Esther did, and for the saving of His people. So, yes?
I looked up the saying because I couldn't remember what it was, but it comes from a poem. God works in mysterious ways. I think we see it in Esther, and I can see it in my own life.
God works in mysterious ways.
He knows the end of the mystery, but we don't.
That's right. How mysterious was it when it come to the Jews' attention that they were going to be annihilated, and it looked like Abraham's promise, the promise to Abraham was not going to come into effect. That was a mysterious way, right? Very good. So I thank you so much for this class. We'll end a few minutes early, but thank you for your attention.